Welcome back, dear listeners, to the firelight. It seems the shadows have drawn you in once more. I am your host, the keeper of the Scriptorium Obscura, and tonight, the flames have chosen a story from the farthest edge of America's wilderness. A tale from where the mountains swallow the sky and the forests never end. So, pour yourself a dark drink, ensure the doors are locked, and settle in. You're going to need your courage for where we are going. They say Bigfoot avoids the Pacific Northwest because of the hunters, the cameras, the curiosity, but the truth is far darker. He doesn't hide from us because he fears discovery. He hides because of what we did to his kind. Tonight's account comes from a man named Elias Warren, a former logging foreman who vanished in 2009 after sending one final tape to his brother, confession, and a warning. What you're about to hear is a reconstruction of that tape. Welcome back to Scriptorium Obscura. If you're new to these chronicles, be sure to subscribe and ring that bell of warning. The night holds many more stories, and trust me, you won't want to miss the next. Let us begin. My name is Elias Warren. I was born in the shadow of Mount Rainier, raised between fog and timber. Out here, men don't talk much. They let the forest do the speaking. Says everything if you learn how to listen. For 22 years, I worked the mills along the Nisqually River, cutting, hauling, measuring, breathing the dust of what once stood tall. They called me Eli the Ox, not for brains, but because I could swing an axe from dawn to dusk without slowing. The company liked that. The forest didn't. We all joked about the local stories, the footprints that turned up in the snow lines, the shapes seen between trunks at dusk. The old-timers called it Saski-TS, the wild guardian of the woods. To the locals, he wasn't a monster. He was balance, a reminder that the forest was never truly ours. But logging doesn't honor myths. Steel doesn't stop for whispers. In 2007, our company bought a patch of forest deep in Lewis County, land the tribes called the Wailing Stretch. Even the name should have stopped us. It was too dense for machines, too isolated for comfort. A green-black maze where GPS went blind and compasses spun lazy circles. That first week, we lost 2 men to the terrain. One broke his leg on a sinkhole. The other vanished after nightfall. Search dogs picked up his scent for half a mile. Then it just stopped. I should have quit right there. But when you've got bills and no backup plan, you don't walk away because the woods hum at night. You keep cutting. And so we did. Each morning, the fog rolled in like a living thing, thick, breathing, heavy with the scent of moss and rain-soaked earth. Each night, the silence grew louder. Animals went missing. Birdsong faded. Even the river slowed, like it didn't want to move through that stretch anymore. First, we thought it was just nerves. Then we found the tracks, 14 inches long, pressed deep into the mud, deeper than any man could leave. Not a prank, not boots, bare feet, wide as shovels. And every print faced toward our camp. That night, the forest began to speak again, not in words, but in warnings. I remember sitting by the fire, watching the trees sway without wind, and feeling for the first time that something was watching back. It wasn't the howl of a wolf or a bear. It was angrier, older, like the land itself had just woken up. We told ourselves it was just distance playing tricks, but deep down we knew something had changed, and it wasn't just fear. It was resentment. Next morning, half our equipment was gone, torn apart, scattered like a tantrum, steel twisted, truck tires shredded, and on the hood of my pickup, smeared in mud, was a handprint the size of a dinner plate. That was the morning we stopped laughing about Bigfoot and started realizing maybe he wasn't the problem. Maybe we were. After the handprint, the company sent in the suits. Not cops, not rangers, just 3 men in clean boots and bright orange vests. The kind that never get dirty no matter how deep the mud. They took photos, samples, told us to keep working, said it was probably a bear. I've seen what bears can do. They don't unbolt machinery. They don't stack fuel cans into neat little pyramids around a sleeping tent. That night, one of the suits, a guy named Porter, decided to make a show of force. He took 2 of our rifles, poured a line of gas around the base of a cedar grove, and said, "We'll smoke the bastard out." I told him the cedar was sacred ground. The locals said it was the oldest in the county, and the only tree left untouched by lightning or saw. He laughed and struck the match anyway. Fire lit the sky like war. The smoke was thick, oily, wrong, like burning flesh instead of bark. Even the air screamed, and then screamed back. The ground shook. Men froze. Porter dropped his rifle. Something huge moved between the flames. A shape too tall, too broad, its eyes reflecting the fire like molten amber. We ran. Every instinct screamed to run, but the forest didn't let us. Branches snagged our clothes. Roots shifted underfoot like snakes. Many somethings moved with us, circling, growling low in their throats. By dawn, only 5 of us were left at camp. The rest gone. No blood, no tracks, just silence. Porter wouldn't speak. He sat by the ashes, shaking, whispering something over and over. I leaned in close and heard it. They didn't come for us. They came for the tree. Later that morning, we saw it. In the ash, buried half under a burned root. Totem, hand-carved, old as anything I've ever seen. It looked human at first. Then I saw the teeth, the long arms, the hair. It wasn't a carving of Bigfoot. It was a warning about him. We radioed for extraction. Nothing. Signal dead. Batteries drained. Even the compasses still spun, lazy as before. That's when the sun disappeared. Not set. Just vanished behind a wall of fog so thick you could taste the wet in your lungs. Every sound in the forest stopped. Not even the rain dared fall. And out of that fog came the smell of blood and pine. Something was moving between the trees, slow, deliberate, like it wanted us to know it was coming. I remember the sound of bark tearing, like paper ripping, and then Porter's scream. When I turned, he was gone. All that was left was the vest, still bright orange, hanging from a branch 10 feet off the ground. That was the moment I understood. This wasn't about territory. It wasn't about us trespassing. It was punishment. We had burned what they protected. We had broken their pact with the land. And now the land wanted payment. That night, none of us slept. The forest was awake, and we could feel it breathing around us. Then, just before dawn, we heard the first whisper. Said my name. Elias's recording ends there for several hours, only static and forest noise. When the tape resumes, what follows is beyond anything you'd expect from a mere legend. What would you have done, dear listener, surrounded by fog and hunted by something the world says doesn't exist? Let me know in the comments below. Now, let's return to Elias. When I woke, it was still dark. The fire had burned to ash, and the fog hung low enough to brush my hair when I stood. There were 3 of us left. Myself, Harlan the mechanic, and a kid named Mason. Mason was 22. Didn't even shave yet. He kept saying he'd quit when the paycheck cleared. I told him he'd better make it home to spend it. We loaded what we could: fuel, rope, flares, and made for the trucks. But the road was gone. Not blocked, gone. The mud tracks we'd driven for weeks were swallowed by moss, like the forest had healed overnight. Mason started panicking, shouting, firing into the fog. I grabbed his rifle, told him to stop, and that's when the echo came back. Not a bullet echo. A voice, low, deep, mimicking him. It wasn't mocking us. It was learning us. Harlan bolted, ran into the trees, screaming he saw something move. I tried to go after him, but the fog closed like a curtain. I heard him for maybe 10 seconds, branches breaking, breath gasping. Then the sound stopped. When I found him, he wasn't torn apart like I expected. No blood, no wounds, just broken. Every joint, every limb bent the wrong way. Eyes wide, mouth open, like he'd seen something too big for his mind to understand. I ran back to camp. Mason was gone. Only his flashlight remained, still on, its beam pointing toward the cedar grove. I followed it. I don't know why. Maybe guilt. Maybe I needed to see. When I reached the grove, the air changed. It was warmer there, and the fog glowed faintly red, like embers beneath the soil. The burned tree was standing again. Not charred, not new. It looked ancient, as if the fire had never touched it. And beneath it were them. Not one creature, not a myth, a tribe. 7, maybe 8 silhouettes taller than men, covered in hair like bark, eyes that glowed faint gold in the dark. They didn't look at me like prey. They looked at me like a criminal. One stepped forward, massive, shoulders like stone. He held something in his hand. When he dropped it at my feet, I realized it was Mason's hat, soaked through with rain and something else. I wanted to speak, to beg, to say we were sorry, but the air itself pressed on my chest. Couldn't make a sound. They circled the cedar, placed their hands on it, reverent like priests. The air shimmered, and the forest began to move. Roots slid from the ground like serpents. Branches twisted and groaned. the entire grove alive, reacting to their grief. Then, from the center of the grove, a sound so deep it rattled my teeth, a roar that wasn't anger, it was mourning, and I understood. We hadn't killed their protector. We'd burned their temple. The tree wasn't sacred because of them. They existed because of it. A covenant older than our words, older than man's claim to soil. They could have killed me, but they didn't. They wanted me to see. When I came to, I was lying at the base of the mountain road. Truck gone. Tools gone. The forest untouched, like we'd never been there at all. But on my arm, etched deep like a burn, was a symbol, the same one carved into that totem. A warning, promise. That's when I knew. They don't avoid Washington because they fear us. They avoid it because it's already claimed. Because we proved what happens when man forgets who truly owns the wild. If you're hearing this, don't come looking. Don't go past the river. And if you ever find a cedar that doesn't burn, turn around. That was the last entry on Elias Warren's tape. A month later, a ranger found his abandoned cabin. Door unlocked, table set, recorder still running. No sign of him. What was left inside were hundreds of carvings. All of them the same, the symbol from his arm. But this isn't the end of the tale, dear listener. Every story leaves a shadow, and this one still moves among the trees. Elias Warren was never seen again. The company filed him as missing, presumed dead. But those who've worked the old forests know better. Some men are not taken by the wild. They are kept. The official reports said the area was unstable, that a landslide swallowed the site. But there was no landslide, no fire, no scar on the earth. It was as if the forest had simply healed. Local tribes refused to enter that stretch for years after. They said the guardians were restless, their mourning unfinished. Some still say that on fog-heavy mornings, you can hear wood creak where no trees stand, and see footprints appear beside your own, pressing deep into the mud, before vanishing into nothing. It's easy to think monsters avoid us out of fear, but sometimes it's mercy, because they've seen what we do to what we don't understand. Maybe Bigfoot doesn't hide from man. Maybe he hides for the world, keeping the wild parts safe from our noise, our fire, our hunger to own what was never ours. Elias's final tape was found years later by a park surveyor. Inside the recorder was a fresh cassette. On it, one sentence whispered in that same rough voice. They forgave me, but they'll never forgive the rest of you. And so ends the account of Elias Warren, the man who learned too late that the forest remembers every trespass, and that we, mankind, are the reason Bigfoot avoids this state. If you dared to journey with Elias tonight, leave a like to let the fire know you're still awake. Share this tale with someone who listens to the wind too long, and subscribe so you don't miss what stirs beyond the tree-line. Until next time, I am the keeper of the Scriptorium Obscura, and I remind you, the oldest stories are often the most true. Sleep well, if you can.